Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode number 99 of the Knights of Last Call live stream. My name is Derek Melinda, and I am here representing the Knights, as I usually am most of these days. But although that's going to be changing here hopefully soon, because we're going to be getting more and more into the studio. I'm going to be joined more by Bob and Aaron and some of our other friends, both old and new, and so it's gonna be a really fun change of pace for me to have more people to bounce this off against and to do stuff against. So yeah, I think it'll be really cool. Am I doing anything fun for episode 100? I didn't even really notice that I was at 100 until I did 99 today. I don't know, Pat. I'll ask the patrons probably tonight, tomorrow, if we want to do anything special. Maybe if Bob or Aaron isn't too busy, maybe we can do Thursday stream from the studio or something. I don't know. We're messing around with some ideas about things we could do there outside of just our actual play. So I don't know. Look, we're here to bring the information, so not pat ourselves in the back. Coral asking, what song is this? The name of the song is Rain Check. Our intro music. It's called Rain Check. And it's by an artist named Dylan Stilts or something. Dylan Stitz. But the name of the song, or the name of the track, is called Rain Check. Hello, Frosty. Nice to see you here. Rocking that red support badge. Thank you so much. As a sort of follow-up, we did have Combat Medic Bush, who may not be here tonight, but the other day had his 14-month streak. So I want to give a shout-out to good old Combat Medic Bush for his support of the channel, and to all of our patrons and adventurers who continue to support Knights of Last Call, because it's a fun little journey that we're going on. Cyber is here, saying won't be able to catch the end, but that's all right. That's what the VOD is for. KC is in the house. Frostjack is here as well. Icarus apparently did not want the Druid, wanted the Thaumaturge. I'm sorry. Thaumaturge eventually. Bob is free. Ooh, so there we go. Look at that. No bear. Yeah, the only thing I got for bear arm cosplay London is my hairy ass arms. There you go. So that's your bear arm cosplay. Sorry. Hello, Rule of Cool. I'm sorry that you can only make it to our Pathfinder 2 ones. Although I have to admit, Rule of Cool does get a little shout out for an amazing avatar. Thank you, Rule of Cool. I appreciate the public ridicule. It is why we do what we do. So thank you. Yeah, we'll have something. We'll do something, Ryan. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is it's really not actually our 100th live stream, because like when we do Quest for the Frozen Flame or when we did Rise of the Rune Lords, like I didn't count those as live streams in terms of the up counting, the tick up. And so technically it's probably like our 125th live stream or 130th live stream. But in terms of like official, sort of Derek talking head live streams, it's number 100. So, well, I hope we make it worth it. Your wild blood. We'll try to get into the Druid here real quick for you to make it sure you get some value out of here. Looking forward to some Druid lore. All right. Well, I got some for you, Pulf. Yes, this is Derek talking at camera number 100. That's exactly right. Although to be fair, some of the counts also had some guests on, and I think we had Vin on, we had Bob on, we've had Ben on, so we've had a bunch of different people. Playing a rogue in NRC2 with a Druid free archetype. There you go. That's sick. All right. Well, as everybody starts to file in here real quick, thank you again for joining us. If you'd like to support this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. Click the like button on this video. These are our ongoing kind of official Pathfinder 2 series where we just kind of talk about the history of some of the classes. Obviously, we talk about Pathfinder 2, but what has become sort of a hallmark of this kind of series is me taking you through the evolution of this class from its roots in the 1970s or the 1980s up through modern Dungeons and Dragons and therefore into Pathfinder, since the lineage of Pathfinder 2nd edition is very much tied to the lineage of Dungeons and Dragons. Can't separate the two. Although, as we move forward and with the orc and everything else, and Paizo's continued, now that they are fully divorced themselves from the OGL with the remastered, I would expect for Pathfinder 3, if and when that day comes, actually to really start to sort of forge their own destiny and really start to maybe stand out as their own game and not feel as tied in to sort of the shackles of the past. But yeah, so thank you to all of you for joining. Thank you to our amazing and incredible patrons for continuing to support us. We have over 300 patrons active now, many of whom are getting geared up to play in our Northern Reaches Pathfinder 2 mega game, which is kicking off here any day now. The GM sites are getting uploaded to the servers, and they're starting to be approved by our overlords, and that means that players are going to start being able to adventure here. So it's going to be crazy. It's going to be awesome. Last season was our first season of Northern Reaches. We started off with like 10 or 12 players for the first month or two. Like we got up to about 20 players. I think within the first 2 months. The campaign has not official, there hasn't been a single adventure yet. I think we have over 60 players. So it's going to be a lot more activity right from the get-go. It's going to be really going to be really awesome. So Bob's got to go. He's got to review a site in 25 minutes. There you go. So again, and thank you to everybody, patrons and people who support us with your tips or your super chats. Because with that money, I'm able to not only, build a cool studio and provide cool merch and fun giveaways. We gave away some Traveler books this year. We gave away some Fate books this year. But it also lets me throw some cash to people like my boy Bob here, who's doing a lot of work to keep the channel going and to keep the Patreon going. And so when I can cut him a check or I can cut Aaron a check, it feels really good. So thank you so much for everybody who has supported us. Can you join in the middle of the Northern Reaches? You certainly can, Grim. In fact, we actually have a unique mechanic this season called the sidekick mechanic, which will allow you, in case you're too low level, to essentially virtually become the level of the party you are joining. And you'll gain experience so that, if you're level 2, you might temporarily bump up to level 8. You'll be able to gain experience and maybe get to level 3. But for that adventure, you'll kind of sort of treat it as being level 8. And then at the end, you'll sort of bounce back down. Now, it's not as good as being level 8, but, there's a couple caveats to that. Like, you don't get all of the feats that you would get if you were level 8. But you do get the class features, and you do get the proficiency increases and stuff like that, that Pathfinder 2 sort of mathematically needs you to have in order for your character to be able to operate, if that makes any sense. Cybersmith coming in with $5. Thank you, Cybersmith. Don't the origins of the Druid go way before D&D? They lived in Britain millennia ago, building great stone circles and chalk horses that still stand. Absolutely, Cybersmith. I mean, the Druid is, probably, arguably, probably the most real world analog to any class that exists in Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder as we know it, in terms of being like an actual practicing thing. There's the monk, but monk can be very, a variety of disciplines. It can be everything from, a Chinese monk or a Japanese monk to a Benedictine monk or a Franciscan monk. So there's been monks all over, different cultures and different histories. But Druid specifically refers to the priesthood of the Celtic people who were Druids. And that's that they had very specific rites and rituals which made their way into the D&D game. So absolutely. In fact, it's probably one of the most ones tied to a real world thing. And I actually completely believe in there are still theoretically people with like sort of, who practice and worship the Druidic faith. I understand that there's people who still go to Stonehenge, on like the solstice or whatever and perform rites and rituals. So it's a little surprising that the Druid's still in the game, because they kind of have been trying to remove any sort of real world appropriation, AKA, right? We're getting rid of, we got rid of, for example, we got rid of phylactery, which became Soul Cage, because phylactery is a real world thing. As part of the Jewish faith. Well, Druids is a real thing for some people of that particular persuasion. It's kind of surprising that we still do that. All right. Anyways, let's get into it, shall we? All right, Druid. So to first talk about the Druid, again, we have to sort of, as Cyber kind of highlighted, the Druid is based out of this Celtic priesthood, which were known as the Druids. They had, they were known for their pagan rites in the pre-Christian England and in surrounding areas. And they practiced a form of animism and natural worship of the seasons, of the weather. They practiced a fair amount of sacrifice, as far as I could tell from my little bit of historical digging. But obviously this had a tremendous impact on Dungeons and Dragons. That being said, of course, this is what we're taking a look here is as at Supplement 1 Greyhawk. So you can think of this as the first splat book for D&D. Now, of course, before first edition, which came out in the late 70s, you had original D&D, sometimes called 0th edition, right, which came out in 1974. And this was, the classic 3 little booklets, which basically evolved into what today we would call the Player's Handbook, the Dungeon Master's Guide, and the Monster Manual. But over the course of the 70s, they released a series of supplement books. And in the first supplement book, the Greyhawk supplement book, written by Gary Gygax and Rob Kuntz, is where we actually technically get the first mention ever in the D&D game. This was originally published in 1976. So just 2 years after the game had first been released, is the first mention of Druids ever in the game. And believe it or not, they are brought up as, oh, great. Hold on a sec. Got to close some windows here. They are originally a monster. Okay, so before they were ever a player race, they were actually a monster. And when they would appear, 1 to 4 of them would appear. There was a 15% chance that they would be in their lair. They had type A treasure, which is pretty good. And we can see if we go into the Druids, these men are priests of a neutral religion. As such, they vary in armor class and hit dice, as well as in movement capabilities, and are a combination cleric / magic user. So the original Druid was a cleric / magic user. And that's really interesting. We'll kind of come back to that because you'll see that as we move forward from the Druid very quickly kind of became very much a priest, a subclass of the cleric, and really did not have any wizard abilities. It's only recently with 5th edition D&D and Pathfinder 2nd edition that the Druid has finally gotten back into some of that magic user territory where the game originally started. So yeah, so again, originally they were magic users, levels 5 through 7, and cleric levels 7 through 9. So capable of casting, fireball and heal spells and, all the stuff that we would normally see. But they did not have a druidic spell list, right? They were just, just magic users / clerics. And we can see here that they can, and this is really funny. This persists through almost 25 years of the game. Druids may shape change 3 times per day, once to a reptile, bird, and animal, from as small as a raven to as large as a small bear. So originally, Druids were just cleric magic users who could shape change 3 times a day, but it had to be reptile, bird, or animal, and they could only do each of those forms once a day. So this was the first instance of the Druid, and this was in 1976. What we would see, however, this was Supplement 1, Greyhawk, is we would eventually move to Supplement 3, which is in my download somewhere. There we go. Okay, this is Supplement 3, Eldritch Wizardry, which came out a few years later. And this is also by Gary Gygax, although this is been by Brian Bloom. This came out in 1976, so technically it came out in 1977, so it was later that the next year. Very famous cover here on Supplement number 3. Let's see here. Damian Williams with a super member chat says, Swords and Wizardry Complete is basically a compilation of all the OD&D books. Yes, so Swords and Wizardry was the original retro clone that sort of replicated the 0th edition. And I know they just came out with a new Kickstarter, sort of a revised version. But if you're looking to play OD&D and don't want to actually deal with all these old manuals, you can take a look at Sword and Wizardry, as Damien suggested. So yeah, reptiles and birds aren't animals. No one knows. So we get here Eldritch Wizardry, which introduced actually 2 classes. It introduced the Scion, this power of psionics, into Dungeons and Dragons, but it also introduced the Druid. Okay, so for the first time ever, we can now get Druids who are player characters. Okay. In fact, it even says to the major class of Druid, there is also a new subclass, that of the Druid. Oh, Jesus Christ. There we go. These are similar to the monster of the same name as is described in the Greyhawk. And if the subclass is allowed in that campaign, the monster should be expanded to correspond to the new subclass. They're like, hey, just update the monster. And so what we get with with the Druid is the Druid is a subclass of the cleric. And this was mentioned in Greyhawk, but they really spill it out here. Druids in original Dungeons and Dragons, and for a good chunk of the game's history, had to be neutral. And I don't mean like neutral good or lawful neutral. I mean true neutral. That was the only alignment that they were permitted to be. Derek is to scrolling a PDF as Bob is to spelling. Well, part of the problem is that the PDF is the worst format that was ever created by man. And even though I have 128 gigabytes of RAM on this machine, somehow PDF still managed to crash. So, it's all good stuff. Anyways, they require mistletoe in order to cast their spells, which again stems from the real world druidic importance of mistletoe. And we get for the first time druids getting their own spell list. Druids have spells which are in general peculiar to them. Although some of their spells are similar to magic users and clerics and generals, however, fire, natural forces, and living things tend to be their forte in this regard. All right. They cannot turn undead, which is, because clerics could turn undead and the druid was a subclass of that. But once a druid becomes an initiate, they gain the following powers. They gain all of the powers. They can identify pure water. They can identify plants and animals. They can pass through overgrowth, such as briars and tangles. So again, once at a couple levels into the game, we get some abilities, which quite frankly are still in the game today. We get the ability to have a sort of an increased ability to recognize and work with plants and animals. We get the ability to pass through unimpeded through briars and tangles and brambles. And as noted in their monster entry, upon reaching 5th circle, which is not 5th level, by the way, druids then gain the power to shape change, as mentioned previously from the druid. And when they change from one form to another, they lose, this is such a weird way to say it, they lose 10 to 60% of any damage previously sustained, which is to say that they heal. In addition, they are not affected by the charm spells of woodland and water creatures such as nixies and dryads. So already we can see the basis for what we know of the modern day druid. Now, interestingly, Pathfinder 2nd edition is probably the first druid that really does not have all of these abilities by default. In Pathfinder 2, the druid, as we'll see, actually gets almost no abilities. They actually have to take all of these abilities by using feats. But back then, druids got all of this stuff. They also got their own language, Druidic, which now is called Wild Song, I believe, in Pathfinder 2nd edition. And we see the beginning of, as was common with the priest character classes like cleric and druid, weapon and armor restriction. They were limited to using daggers, sickle, and crescent-shaped swords, spears, slings, and oil. The sickle and crescent-shaped swords being particularly important due to the druids in real life's use of them for their sacrifices and for their rites and rituals, particularly the sickle, which is why while they cannot use metal armor, they can somehow wield a scimitar because I guess it looks like the moon. We also see that they had limited armor use, only leather armor. But again, the idea that there's this sort of naturalistic bend to their armor, which was not as good as what the cleric could wield. And they are basically essentially a cleric, usable, all the same items that a cleric can use. And they get to use the fighting abilities and saving throws of a cleric, but they get a bonus to saving throws versus fire. And then we see kind of this idea that we would nowadays call sort of an edict or an anathema, which is druids have an obligation to protect woodland animals and plants, especially trees. And so, druids will not slay an animal if it could be avoided. They will not deliberately destroy a copse or woods or forest. So again, a lot of what we know from the modern day druid was laid down here in 1976. Also, interestingly, like the monk, the druid does not have psychic potential. Therefore, they are banned from becoming psychic. I don't know why that was important to them, but the druid could not become a psychic. So I guess the druid just doesn't have it in them. And yeah, exactly, rule of cool. Even from this point of time, they could have a shield. And this was back when, in Pathfinder 2, anybody can use a shield. But in this time frame, you needed specifically to have shield proficiency. Otherwise, you did not get anything. And so we can see here the druid spell list. And it's, in many cases, very similar to some of the spells that we know today. In fact, this spell list of the druids would pretty much persist all the way through until we get to 5th edition and particularly Pathfinder 2nd edition, where they really started to put a little bit more punch into the Druids spell list. We can see that they've got all the animal and weather spells. They get a handful of lightning and fire spells. And at the higher levels, they get the ability to summon animals, elementals, and, pretty much a lot of the spells that we're used to dealing. Now, of course, for those of you who don't remember or don't know, back in the original version of the game, only wizards got 9th level magic. Clerics and druids only got as high as 7th level of spells. And we can see here that they would get all the way to firestorm, control weather, conjure earth elemental. So again, they could shapeshift, the rules of which were pretty vague. You just saw what they said in the book. But Bezos was like, yeah, you could turn into a bear, you could turn into a bird. And this was like from very early level. So that was our druid in 1976. And from there, we hop over to 1st edition AD&D 1979. Gygax wanted to clean up the game. He wanted to make a rule for everything. And so, Dungeons and Dragons became advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and we got what is now called 1st edition. And we can see that there is the Druid as well in this game. It is still a subclass of the Cleric. You can see that they are still limited to leather armor. They are still limited to wooden shields. They're still limited to clubs and daggers, scimitars, slings. They picked up hammer, though, so that was pretty cool. They could use flaming oil, but wasn't sure if they could use poison. So interestingly here, this is the Cleric, by the way, that we're looking at here. You can see that the Cleric needed 1,500 experience points to level, and that doubles every level, more or less. And you can see that the Cleric spell progression is fairly slow here. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. But when we go to the Druid, we can see that the Druid required 2,000 experience points to level to 2, and then that also roughly doubled. They got D8s just like the Cleric, but we can see that the Druid gets a little bit more spells earlier on. You can see that they get 2 level 1 spells at level 1, but then at level 2, they get their first 2nd level spell. And at level 3, by level 3, the Druid already has a level 3 spell. So, and then it slows down, right? We don't get a 4 until 6, and we get a 5 at 9. So there's a very strange, you get a very quick progression of Druidic spell casting. So it's a very interesting and different class for sure, but there is something that's really important to note, which is if you looked at the Cleric spell list, they had the Cleric going all the way to level 29 with their spells, okay? But the Druid caps out at level 14, and that's because Druids could only get to level 14 in 1st edition Dungeons and Dragons. That was the highest level that they were capable of achieving. They couldn't get any higher than that. Cybersmith says, did old school Druids get followers? Some classes did. Yeah, we'll talk about that. We will talk about that, Cyber. Yes, kind of. All right. So let's talk about the Druid. First things first, still needs to be absolutely neutral. They needed a 12 wisdom and a 15 charisma. So the Druid was definitely a more powerful class that required, higher investment and required more ability scores that you would otherwise need. You can also see that, Druids have spells which are attuned to nature, outdoors, much more so than spells of the magic user or the Cleric. Nonetheless, Druids serve to strengthen, protect, and revitalize as the Cleric does. The more powerful Druidic spells, as well as their wider range of weaponry, make up for the fact that the Druids are unable to use any armor or shields other than leather armor and wooden shields. So in their mind, even Gygax was thinking that the Druidic spells were stronger than the Cleric spells, because in his mind, the Cleric got, great armor, the Druid got okay armor, but their spell list was stronger. And Gygax, kind of a bit of a historian here, says, Druids can be visualized as medieval cousins of what the ancient Celtic sect of Druids would have become had it survived the Roman conquest. They hold trees, particularly oak and ash, the sun and the moon as deities. Mistletoe is the holy symbol of Druids. All right. But we can see here that at 3rd level, they get identification of pure water, plants, and animals, just like we saw in the original version of the Druid. Additionally, at 7th level, they get the ability to shape change 3 times a day, actually becoming, in all respects save the mind, a reptile, bird, or mammal. And again, they can only assume that form once a day. It can vary from as small as a blue jay, bullfrog, or bat to as large as a snake, eagle, or black bear. And each time you change form, you heal. All right? So, this is almost a carbon copy of what we got in 1976's Eldritch Wizardry. They get their own tongue at 3rd level, just like in Eldritch Wizardry. They fight as a cleric do. They use magical items as a cleric do. But now we get into some new, this is Druidic history for those of you who didn't play. The idea when you were a Druid in 1st edition Dungeons and Dragons is you were part of this global Druidic order. Okay. That, like, by default, the class puts you into this sort of hierarchy of Druids. You could think of it as a little bit of an analog to, what we would consider today with the Catholic Church, how you have priests who roll up to bishops, who roll up to cardinals, who roll up to the Pope. And as such, at the upper levels, there are only a limited number of characters. At 12th level, which is when, back then in the D&D games, you got a level, a title. Okay. So, in the beginning of the game, your class was Druid, but technically you were called an aspirant. And then you were, an initiate of the 1st circle, the 2nd circle. And then at level 12, your character finally got the title of Druid. But guess what? At 12th level, there are only 9 of these nature priests. Each such 12th level Druid is the leader of a lesser body of lesser Druids and will have an entourage of 3 of their underlings. So this is answering your question, Cyber. So when you got to level 12, you got 3 aspirants at 1st level to serve you, while the highest level Druid will have 3 aspirants of 9th level, and so on and so forth. So again, at level 12, there could only be 9 of these Druids. Okay. And by the way, you're like, oh, that's just a fluffy bullshit time. No. At such time as a Druid class player character obtains experience points, okay, sufficient to advance him or her to 12th level, the corresponding powers are gained only if there are currently fewer than 9 Druids, or the player character beats one of the other 9 Druid level characters in spell or hand-to-hand combat. If the combat is not mortal, meaning you don't fight to the death, whoever loses drops the exact number of experience points to drop them back down to level 11 so that they're not level 12. So, okay, so there you go. Like there could literally only be 9 of these things. Now, here's what's crazy about these. At the highest peak you have at level 14, you have the Great Druid, aka the Pope, basically, of Druidic. Above all other Druids is the lone figure, the Great Druid. And by the way, this process of there can only be, 9, well, it applies to the Great Druid too, except there can be only 1. Okay. And so if you were a 13th level Archdruid and you wanted to become 14th level and obtain your ultimate power, you either had to wait for the Archdruid or the Great Druid, to die and, be the successor, or you had to beat him in combat. and defeat him either to the death, or if it wasn't to the death and you lost, your character would lose experience and go back down to the level that you used to be. So this is very strange to our modern day sensibilities. One druid to rule them all. Literally, Silverwolf. Literally. Damian Williams with a $2 super chat says, Druids rocked Highlander rules. Yes, exactly. It's literally that. And it's just absolutely crazy. So you gain all these cool abilities. Now, aren't great druids immortal? No, they are not. We have not gotten to that yet. That in first edition, that was not part of the lore of the game. So basically you got these really cool powers. You could shape change. You could talk. You could identify plants and animals. You could speak to hill giants, lizardmen, nixies, dryads, centaurs, and sprites. You couldn't use metal armor, right? I mean, most of the stuff is fairly similar to what we know of as the druid today, except for the part where if you got high enough level, you had to fight other druids to the death in order to gain a level. By the way, it says multiple attempts to move upwards are possible as long as your character survives. And now someone asked, if you got to 14th level, couldn't you just multi-class? No, you couldn't just multi-class because multi-classing wasn't something that you did when you leveled up in first edition. A multi-class character was a fighter/thief from the very beginning of the game, right? So if you were an elf, you could be like a fighter thief, but you would be that at first level, and you would get all the abilities of a fighter and all the abilities of a thief. And you would take the best hit die and all that other stuff, and then all that other jazz, and they would level up at different rates, but you had to make that decision at the beginning of the game. What humans could do, which no other class could do, is called dual classing, which is a kind of a different thing. But basically in dual classing, a human with really, really high stats could essentially put their old class on pause, and they would actually lose all of the abilities. Okay. And then they would go back and restart the game at first level. And you couldn't use your high level abilities because you were focusing on your new abilities. And it wasn't until your new class got to the same level or higher level than your old class that you could unlock all of your old abilities. All right. So, no, this is first edition, Coral. So Druids got their XP from treasure and monsters, just like everybody else. Do you keep gaining XP even though you didn't level? No. Because if by the way, if you fight the druid above you, okay, the losing combatant drops the exact number of experience points necessary to put them at the beginning of the next lower level. So you would lose your experience points to go back to being the prior level because you weren't cool enough to advance. Yes, GM Scott is absolutely correct. When we were talking about dual classing, you could use your old abilities, but then you didn't get any experience points because it was kind of like you were, it's like you were trying to quit, smoking or drinking or something like that. And you had a slip up. And so, that it kind of sets you back and you didn't gain any experience points for that. So, I remember that when I was first starting to play Dungeons & Dragons, Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, first edition, we were all fairly low level. I had a monk, and we were all fairly low level, but one of the players was actually like a level 16 or 17 wizard, but had dual classed and restart the game as like a very low level fighter. And so on paper, they were a fighter, but in theory, they actually had all of their 17th level wizard abilities. But if they used them, they didn't get any experience. But it was kind of like in case of fire, break glass on, and get or in case of a fire, pull emergency handle, because if they needed to, they could pull out a meteor swarm, but they just wouldn't get any experience points for their fighter if they did that. So it was really kind of an interesting scenario. I don't remember how often, if he ever did anything that dramatic, because I think he wanted XPs, but it was pretty cool. So that's 1979, and that was the Druid for a good 10 years through the 80s, until we got to second edition. Now at this point, we're at 1989, right? We're almost into the 90s. We're almost into Magic the Gathering, CD-ROMs, White Wolf, Storyteller. Clearly, you know, our concept or our ideas about the Druid would have significantly changed, you know, by this point in time. And I'm sure it's going to be extremely different from what we had before, right? Wrong. In fact, if we look at the Druid, so for starters, the Druid is still a subclass of the what is now called the Priest. But the first thing that we want to call out here, all right, is the spell progression. Now, Druids follow the same spell progression as everybody else. They're on the same track as the Cleric and the Wizard, which basically means you get one spell at level 1, and at level 3, you get access to your second rank of spells, and at level 5, you get access to your third rank of spells, so on and so forth. Now, in 2nd edition D&D, the Clerics and the Druids still only got to 7th level of magic. Only the Wizard could get to 9th level of magic. But now the Druids were on this, slower track. But they still required more experience than the Cleric, and they still got their D8 hit dice. But now we see that there is a chart that goes all the way to level 20, and we see that the Druids is really, really strange, because you can see that at level 16, okay, they need 3.5 million experience points. But then to get to level 17, they need 500,000. And then they need 1 million and 1.5 and 2 million. And that's because in 2nd edition Dungeons and Dragons, the Druid, just like before, required a 12 wisdom, 15 charisma. Guess what? They had the same restrictions as before. They could use sickles, darts, spears, daggers. You'll note now they've lost the ability to use hammers. They only had that in 1st edition. They had the same kind of restricted spell list, focused on plants, animals, and nature. They could still identify plants, animals, and pure water. They could pass through overground areas of tangles and briars. They could learn the languages of woodland creatures. And again, they got all of the same abilities that they've been getting since the 70s. And guess what? We can still shape change, and you guessed it, 3 times a day into a reptile, a bird, or a mammal. Yes, more charisma than wisdom. Druids required a 15 charisma and a 12 wisdom. However, even though it is 1989, guess what? Druids still have the Druid organization. Druids have a worldwide structure. At their upper levels, only 9 Druids will reach level 12. At 12th level, the Druid character acquires one of the 9 Druids in a magical or hand-to-hand combat, therefore assuming the defeated Druid's position. If such combat is not mortal, the loser drops experience points, so they have exactly 200,000 experience points remaining, just enough to be 11th level. So, yep, you are still required to fight to the death, more or less, in order to gain level 12. What they do change here is that the highest ranking in the Druid is the Great Druid, the Grand Druid, which is at 15th level. All right? Unlike Great Druids, the Grand Druid is attended by a bunch of other Druids and such, etc., etc. The Grand Druid cannot be won through combat. Now they must select their successor from amongst lesser Druids. So now you can't even fight to get your high level. You have to be chosen. A generally unexciting anyone for except a politician. After a few 100,000 experience points of such stuff, any adventurer worthy of the name is probably ready to move on to something else. This is very strange, because basically the implied implication is that your character is no longer an adventurer. You're a political leader of a mass worldwide religion. Instead, what they gave us in 2nd edition was that you could basically step down from your position as the Grand Druid, and you would relinquish all of your special abilities that you got from being the Grand Druid, and you lost all of your experience points, but you get to keep the rest of your abilities. You are now a 16th level Hierophant Druid and begin advancing anew. So it's like, if you got all the way to the top, you could step down, let somebody else be the Great Druid, and get back to adventuring. You would reset your experience points and then be able to progress on through the rest of the game. It's very, very strange, but there was a cool advantage to this. Because if you manage to do this, aka climb to the political top of Druid arena, and yeah, exactly, Dominius, become a Druid, the Grand Druid Emeritus, okay, stepping down as a 16th level Hierophant Druid, aka you used to be number 1, now you've stepped down, somebody else is running the show, but you are this kind of like, right, Druid Emeritus. For the first time ever, we see some of the abilities that we've also come to associate with the Druid, which is high level, you get 4 powers. You get all of these. You become immune to natural poisons. You gain extreme vigorous health for your age. By the way, this was actually really sweet in 2nd edition, because in 2nd edition D&D, as your character got older, especially if you're a human or half-elf, which happened pretty quickly, your character would start to lose ability scores. Your strength and dexterity and constitution would go down as you got older. But a Druid maintained, extreme health no matter their age, and so they did not suffer those ability score penalties as they continued to age. In addition, they could alter their appearance at will. So they can basically now sort of shape change to appear as anyone and anything. And then at 17th level, they gain the biological ability to hibernate, right? Your body function slows to the point where the character appears to be dead, and you are in complete hibernation. Now, you're not immortal, but you can essentially go into a suspended animation. And so at the very highest level, you can transport yourself into the elemental planes. So Druids kind of gain this really weird, wonky set of capstone abilities that just involves you becoming first the head leader of a massive worldwide Druidic political organization, and then you could finally get your last couple of abilities. So Cybersmith with a super chat, thank you, says, back in AD&D 1st edition, how hard was it to defeat a version of you that is 1 level higher? It would be very hard in Pathfinder 2nd edition. Seems almost like a soft lock / DM fiat. Cybersmith, I would say not that much different. In fact, if we look at, this is 2nd edition Cybersmith, but if we look at the Druid, you can see that this over here on the left is for the cleric and the druid. This is how many hit dice, aka how many 1d8s you roll in order to determine your hit points. You'll notice that at level 9, it stops going up. After level 9, your druid or your cleric no longer rolls d8 plus constitution every time you gain a level. You don't get 8 plus your con, okay? You get 2 hit points. So the hit point difference between a level 9 druid and a level 12 druid, okay, is like 10. All right. It is not a lot, right? It's 6. It's not a lot. Okay. Very, very small amount. In addition, your armor class and your attack bonus and all that other stuff was not tied to level. So the armor class of a level 7 druid was probably exactly equal to the armor class of a level 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 druid. The only thing that would possibly make your armor class better is if you had magical armor. If you had +3 leather armor instead of, say, +2 leather armor, then your armor class would be 1 better. Absolutely. Absolutely. But keep in mind, the way that the game works is you get to that level and then you have to fight them. So technically you are that level. And then whoever loses either dies, or if you lose but didn't die, that whoever lost drops back down to a level. So the way it would work is you would actually get to level 12. And then before you could get all your cool level 12 powers, you had to go fight another level 12 druid. And then if you were the victor, you could get all your cool level 12 abilities. Otherwise you did not. And you would lose a level. So pretty crazy. But, again, the druid is still pretty much the same class that we've been seeing. And, it's I don't want to say it's unexciting, but it's not exactly that different until all the PDFs crash, which is cool. Let's see here. Player's Handbook. Here we go. Until we get to 3rd edition. Okay. And here's, this is what Pathfinder 1 was born out of. So now we are getting to, the years 2000, and we come up with the new Druid for 3rd edition D&D. And, it's a very different, it's a very different world now, right? Where, there are no more ability requirements to be a class. Everybody is on the same experience point progressions, right? So, one of the things you have to remember about older editions of Dungeons and Dragons is, and it only makes sense if you think about it a certain way. Certain classes were allowed to be more powerful than other classes because they had really high requirements for your ability scores in order to be that class. As an example, we saw that the Druid seems like it was way cooler than the Cleric, especially in those older editions. But the Druid required not only a 12 wisdom, the Cleric only needed a 9 wisdom, but they also required a 15 charisma. Now, you might be thinking, oh, that's not so bad. Right. But remember, back then, you used to roll 3 6-sided dice in order for your ability scores. You didn't get to put your ability scores wherever you wanted to. You didn't do 4d6 drop low. Okay, now there are a lot of groups that probably bent these rules and cheated these rules a little bit, which was potentially problematic because the idea is that these characters were powerful, but it was balanced because it was rare. That's what made it okay. Now, of course, if you're the character who gets lucky enough to get a really cool character class like Druid or Monk or Paladin, I mean that's awesome for you, right? You have something to protect. You're almost a little nervous because your character, is kind of a rare special thing. But the other way that they balanced character classes was by the experience point progression. We saw that in the early editions, character classes like the Thief only required 1,500 experience points, or 1,200 experience points, to level, whereas the Wizard required 2,500. So they knew that the Wizard spells were very powerful, but as a result, the Wizard leveled slower than some of his companions. And again, that was a way that they could balance the power of some of these abilities. But with 3rd edition, they got rid of ability score requirements to enter classes. Everybody used the same experience point progression. And so for the first time ever, the classes had to be balanced. So this was the great challenge of 3rd edition. And hopefully the PDF decides to load. Here we go. Unfortunately, they completely failed. And what was born is frequently known as, let me get here real quick. Here's our Cleric, and here's our Druid. No longer a subclass of the Cleric. The Druid is their own class. And we can see there's a lot of the same things are still here, right? We got, they have to wear light armor. They can't wear metal. They have a D8 hit points. We can see now that their alignment can be any form of neutral, right? They don't just have to be true neutral. They can now be neutral good, lawful neutral, chaotic neutral, all right? They're still proficient with club, dagger, dart, spear, scimitar, sickle, short spear, sling, right? Their spiritual oaths prevent them from using other weapons. They are proficient with light and medium armor, but are prohibited from wearing metal armor. So again, that same vibe is still there. But, as I said before, they failed completely because what is generally known as the codzilla was born. And for those of you who don't understand the reference, it's like, Godzilla, the gigantic, scary lizard monster that crushes everything before it. Except in this case, the codzilla... Oh, hold on a sec. All right. The codzilla referred to cleric or druidzilla. And this is because druids and clerics were extremely powerful in 3rd edition. The druid, let's break it down. What was broken in 3rd edition? Well, spellcasting in general, You had, a lot of instant death spells. You had spells that were just completely broken that would completely override any of the other classes' abilities. So spells were broken in general. And guess what? When we got to 3rd edition, druids and clerics were no longer limited to mere 7th level spells. No. They got up to 9th level spells just like everybody else. Okay, great. So they're really, really powerful spellcasters, just like the wizard. Exactly. But unlike the wizard, they get armor. They get shields. They get a good base attack bonus. They get a good fort save and a good will save, which in this edition of D&D were unbelievably important because the spells that would attack you to say, I don't know, dominate you or put you out or kill you were fort saves and will saves. Oh, but you're a druid or a cleric, so your wisdom is really good. Your constitution's probably pretty good too. Great. So you have an insane set of saves. Oh, on top of all of that, spells being broken, what kind of spells were broken? Well, turns out summon spells were really broken in 3rd edition. And guess what druids could do? You guessed it, they could summon. Druids could turn their spells that they had prepped for the day into summons spontaneously. You could just summon up a bunch of animals, giving you like 3 or 4 extra barbarians worth of fighters. Oh, what else was broken in 3rd edition? Polymorph, or changing shape. And guess what druids could do? You guessed it. Polymorph and change shape. Druids were incredibly powerful in 3rd edition. And there are so many ways and options and builds that could just completely wreck and just crush everybody. It wasn't uncommon for the druid's animal companion. And by the way, this was a new thing, which had not existed prior in any prior edition. We just walked through them. For the first time ever, druids got an animal companion. And in many instances, even at level 1, the animal companion was stronger than like your group's fighter or barbarian. And when you include some of the buff spells that a druid could cast on their animal companion, many of which, by the way, lasted hours per level. So we're talking about 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. It is not uncommon for just the druid's animal companion, which, by the way, had its own complete full turn, to be more powerful than another PC. And then you had your druid, who was also an incredibly powerful spellcaster and could polymorph themselves into a busted, broken-ass animal and also wreck face and crush and kill. So the druid became this, this codzilla. And, we still see that they get a lot of the same abilities. They know this special druidic language. They can identify plants and animals with perfect accuracy. They can tell whether water is safe to drink or dangerous. And while, some of the exact wording has changed, it's still being able to, it's the year 2000 at this point, and we're still being able to do the same things we could do back in 1976. We still have woodland stride to move through briars and magical briars and thorns. We get our wild shape ability, but of course now we can do it many times per day, and we can change into a bunch of different shapes, and we don't just have to change into one bird, one reptile, one mammal. And at higher levels, we can turn into large and huge animals. We can turn into elementals. It becomes pretty crazy. And we're completely gone with the whole political great druid, only one. There can be only one. Now you just level up just like everybody else. And as you get higher in level, you just now gain these abilities all the way to the point where you get to 15th level. You gain that timeless body ability where you no longer suffer the effects of aging, and your character is broken and powerful beyond belief. The druid is still operating off of their own unique spell list, the druid spell list, which is distinct from the cleric spell list and the sorcerer wizard spell list. We're looking for it here. So many spells. Here we go. The druid spell list, like as before, is still primarily focused on plants, animals, and natural stuff. There's a little bit of flame and electricity, but you'll notice, like if we look at 3rd level druid spells, you get the spell Call Lightning, which is not really honestly all that good, but you'll notice no fireball, no lightning bolt, right? We don't get those kind of spells. We just get these kind of druidic versions of them, but there's still some really powerful spells within all of this space. Goodberry is very powerful. Again, Summon Nature's Ally is very powerful. Animal Growth is probably one of the most busted spells in the game. But the Druid can also heal. They can cure light wounds and cure critical wounds, and they can do all these really cool things. So the Druid is a very, very powerful spellcaster all the way up to 9th level, including getting access to some of the best spells in the game, like Mass Heal. So the Druid was unbelievably powerful and unbearably broken. And that brings us to the 4th edition Druid. Now, for the first time, Druid was not in the original Player's Handbook 1. The Druid came in the Player's Handbook 2, which made the character part of the primal set of character classes that got released in Player's Handbook 2. And so we get access to the Druid. And following our Pathfinder, or following our 4th edition ethos, the Druid was a controller. And this was pretty cool because in Player's Handbook 1, you only had one controller, which was the wizard. And so when they took a look at the Druid, they said, okay, what do we want the Druid to do? Because like you could say, well, I want the Druid to, the Druid was, capable of casting heal and cure spells. They could be a leader. The Druid was capable of turning into, a powerful lion or bear and ripping people apart. It could be maybe it could be a tank, it could be a defender, it could be a striker. But what they chose to focus on instead was the Druid sort of controlling aspects, right? Spells like Entangle or large area of effects of things like thunder and lightning, winds crashing down, which is definitely the hallmark of the controller. And again, some people don't like 4th edition, but one of the things 4th edition did was it got rid of these extremely powerful broken character classes that could do everything better than everybody else. And the Druid was a very balanced class. Now, 4th edition obviously changed a lot. And while, when we look at these, classes, we could still see the sort of underpinnings of the Druidic path that we've been on. 4th edition obviously did change things quite a bit. But one thing is definitely the case is that you start the game with the ability to wild shape, except now, instead of it saying, pick any animal that has ever been released in any monster manual ever and turn into it and get all of its benefits and none of its penalties, it just became part of a very balanced, progression. No 3.5. What happened to Pathfinder 1st edition? Mike T, I kind of skipped 3.5 because the 3.5 Druid was fairly similar to the 3.0 Druid for the most part. I will say this, the main thing that they changed in Pathfinder 1 and 3.5 with the Druid is they started to rein in the wild shape ability. They started to rein in the animal companion ability by sort of the animal companion was no longer just pick a broken animal, that's your animal companion. The animal companion had this sort of progression chart where it kind of leveled up at a more reasonable and balanced rate. And when you polymorphed, it was no longer like, oh, you become a polar bear? Cool, your strength's 38. Instead, it was more like, oh, you get a certain bonus, but you don't get all the cool abilities of the animal. And it started to become much more balanced. That being said, 3.5 introduced a whole host of other broken spells that made the Druids extremely powerful and broken anyways, so it's not like it really fixed the problem. So if we look at a Druid in 4th edition, we can see that they have these sort of wild shape powers, and then they also have sort of these elemental powers that allow them to, attack a group of enemies. So, they can twisting vines to, vines and roots erupt from the ground and attack nearby creatures, or they can, darting bite. And so the way that, wild shaping kind of worked in 4th edition was it was more like these temporary changes to your shape that allowed you to quickly make a biting attack, but you didn't like fully turn into a bear. And again, people were like, that's what I like about D&D. I like turning into a bat and being able to fly around at level 1 because I'm a druid. And turns out that's pretty broken. And that's why in games like 5th edition and Pathfinder 2 and stuff like that, you can't just, turn into a flying eagle at level 1. It's something that you have to wait until other classes could probably be flying or, turning invisible or something like that to make it a lot more balanced and a lot more fair. So I'm not going to go too much into 4th edition. The 4th edition Druid, again, is very different than anything we've seen prior to this because of its nature in 4th edition. But I will say it is a really, really cool class. So I think it's really, really fun. And then I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the 5th edition Druid. Because I don't really, obviously after the 4th edition Druid and, sort of the response to 4th edition, boy, these PDFs, huh? There we go. All right. The Druid, 64. The Druid in 5th edition is like kind of like a harken back to the old version of the Druid, but in a very balanced and sort of totally unoffensive way. They get the spell progression that everybody else gets in 5th edition, with the spells gaining a couple of slots, but you don't get all the slots. You get a wild shape ability, but you can see here how limited it is. There is a Druidic Circle, a subclass that you can choose, which does increase your ability to wild shape. But unless you're that wild shape, what is going on with this PDF viewer, huh? Anyways, you get a wild shape ability. But what I think is what I really want to focus on here, if it'll let me do this, is, and you could, by the way, you can see here for the wild shape ability, look at all. If we go back to 1976, the wild shape ability said you could become a bird, a reptile, or a mammal. You could do this 3 times a day, and that's it. That's the rules. Okay? That's the rules. Look at all these rules for beast shape. It's like, okay, at 2nd level, you can turn into a maximum CR of 1/4, but it can't fly and it can't swim. Okay, then when you transform, you assume the beast's hit points and hit dice. Also, you retain your intelligence, wisdom, charisma, but you retain your charisma and your proficiencies, abilities. You can't take actions. You can't cast spells that require you to use hands. You can't, it's like there's just all this just endless rules text just to try to keep it in the game, but to keep it, balanced. So the Druid in 5th edition is very much a balanced and neutered version of what it used to be. Well, what I wanted to show, which I don't think it'll let me because of how horrible this PDF is. Oh, here we go. Is I wanted to show the Druidic spell list from 5th edition, because they started to add some additional spells to it that I really think made the Druid a little bit more offensive, and I think honestly should have always been there. And because that's being annoying and not loading, I'm just going to close that and open up. There we go. The Druid from Pathfinder 2nd edition. So here's our Druid in Pathfinder 2nd edition. And, obviously the people who are making Pathfinder 2nd edition, are working off of this history of the Druid. They understand that with the exception of Pathfinder, or with the exception of 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons, the Druid has always had this legacy of being a nature priest with magic that sort of walks the line between mage and cleric. In 3rd edition, they gained an animal companion, and they had the ability to wild shape. Now, Druids in 3rd edition and Pathfinder 1st edition could always do all of those things. But Pathfinder 2nd edition, we do not get such fun to be had. Because if we look at the Druid in Pathfinder, what we see is a very basic shell of a class. They're trained in perception. They start trained in 2 saves, expert in will. They don't really get that many skills. They get very bad armor weapon. They get very bad attack proficiencies. They get very bad defensive proficiencies. In some ways, they have that sort of base chassis that all the primary casters have. And they do get primal spells. So they are a primal only caster. And the primal tradition is quite strong. In fact, I would say that the primal tradition in Pathfinder 2nd edition is, outside of like the completely nutso broken stuff that was from 3rd edition, the primal tradition is the best tradition that we have had in a long time for the Druid. Because I think the primal tradition is a fantastic. Some people say it's the 2nd best tradition. I think I prefer a cult. But the fact of the matter is that now you finally have a Druid who can not only cast heal, which is the best, one of the best, if not the best support spell in the game, but the Druid can also cast Chain Lightning, Fireball, Lightning Bolt, some of the top tier damage dealing spells in the game. And unlike the Cleric, they can cast Haste and Slow and Chain Lightning and Fireball and can cast Heal. The primal spell list is incredible. It doesn't have a lot of tricksy stuff, mental stuff, illusion stuff. But what it does have is some of the heavy hitting spells in the game and some of the best healing and defensive spells. Most of your classic divine type spells, remove poison, remove disease, heal, these are all spells that the primal tradition gets. So primal is an incredibly powerful spell tradition that really helps the Druid out. That being said, although we know this is changing, there are some sacred cows in here that the Druid still has. They cannot use metal armor or shields. They can't despoil natural places. They cannot teach Druidic to non-Druids. But the Druid as a class gets a very unimpressive list of abilities. They start off with shield block, which quite frankly is so weird to me. It's so odd to me that the Druid starts off with shield block. I don't even know why they start off with shield block, to be honest with you. It's so bizarre to me. Yes, the Druid used to be able to use a shield. A lot of classes used to be able. The Ranger used to be able to use the shield. Why does the Ranger not start with shield block? I don't understand why, of all the things that they could have given the Druid, why they gave them shield block. It's pretty crazy. The Bard doesn't get shield. It's so crazy. It's so crazy. Cybersmith with a 10-pound super chat. Thank you, Cybersmith. By the way, thank you, Cybersmith. You're keeping us afloat tonight. Thank you. Appreciate it. I think the differential versus equalized XP tracks as one of the biggest factors in how classes have to be designed. You could get a lot of level 1 features if you were stuck at level 1 when others were level 3. That's actually a good point, Cybersmith. Some of those classes used to be pretty front loaded, but or just powerful, but you were always a couple levels behind some of your other companions, and that did make a big difference. It's an interesting game design space. The other thing it does, Cybersmith, is it allows for certain character classes to catch up easier. The Druid, if we look here, they start off with shield block, which again is questionable at best. And they get wild empathy, which lets you use diplomacy to make an impression on animals. Now, before you used to be able to just identify animals at will. You could speak to animals, and now, we can use diplomacy to make an impression on them and to make very simple requests of them. Both of these are not the best abilities in the world. When we think about what the Druid used to have in terms of power, but of course now that is all locked behind feats. But after that, all the Druid gains are increased proficiencies and increased spells. You don't get anything else from a class feature after that point. So it's pretty brutal in terms of the class. And again, it goes without saying, but the the chassis of the Druid is not great. I think we kind of already knew this, but you know, the Druid has, you know, one of the worst, you know, tied with like wizards for weapon progression. They are not a fighter anymore. The Druid always used to be a combatant. They were on the priest BAB, and now they suck. They cannot fight. Their armor is trained and expert, and you know, just like a lot of the caster classes, it's not it's not especially high or low or anything like that. Their spell casting does get to legendary, just like, you know, the cleric, just like the wizard. And so they are just basically following that exact spell casting progression. Their saves suck. The Druid starts off trained in fortitude and gets to expert, and their reflex is trained and gets to expert, and their will gets to master with save specialization. They don't get anything to legendary. They have 2 saves that cap at expert, and even their best save caps at master. So the Druid has terrible saves, just like some of the other classes, like the cleric. So, you know, and their perception also caps at expert, which is pretty common for a lot of classes as well. So again, they're not really doing a whole lot with their chassis. Okay. So the only thing that they really have going for them is they have their spell list, which is the primal tradition, which is strong. I'm not going to lie. It's strong. And they get their feats and their order. So the real question is, how strong is the Druid? Because we know primal's good, right? We know the primal list is very compelling and strong. You know, you get access. Now, of course, a cleric at level 1 is going to have, you know, they're going to have 2 spells, 2 first level spells. And then they're also going to have, you know, 3 or 4 heal spells. So they're going to have 6 spells at level 1. Your Druid is going to have 2. That's rough. So one of the things, if you look at our class tier ranking, is I said that the cleric has a pretty significant advantage in the low levels because they get such a drastic increase. Now, eventually the divine font falls off. By the time you have 18 or 19 or 20 or 30 spells, it doesn't really matter that the cleric's getting a couple extra spells. Yes, they're max level, they're high level heals. It is really cool. There's no doubt about that. But fundamentally, it doesn't really matter that much compared to the total number of spells you have. But at the beginning of the game, if you're a Druid, it can feel kind of crappy because the cleric gets 2 spells and they get 4 divine or 3 divine font heals. Meanwhile, you get an order, and the Druidic orders are like your subclasses, okay? Usually tied to some sort of form of elemental type, right? You get animal, flame, leaf, stone, storm, wave, wild. So we have sort of all these elemental types: fire, earth, air, water, and then we also get plants and animals, right? So we got 4 elements, plants, and animals. Those are our Druidic orders. And what do these give us? Well, fundamentally, what they give us is a focus spell, which, by the way, a cloistered cleric gets through their domain focus, which they get at level 1. So what this means is that at level 1, a cloistered cleric and a druid are essentially fundamentally the same, except the druid gets shield block, but the cleric, and they both get a focus spell, but the cleric gets 3 or 4 extra spells in heal. Now, why is that balanced? In theory, it's because the primal spell list is better than the divine spell list. I think by a considerable margin. I think the divine spell list isn't that great. So having access to the primal is pretty cool. So you do have that going for you. And like the cleric, the druid is a prepared caster, but can pick from all of their spells. They don't have to have a spell book like a wizard does or a familiar like a witch does. So there is something cool about being able to have complete access to your entire list, especially a list that is as strong and powerful as the primal list. So in terms of these orders, the problem with them is, in my personal opinion, some of these focus spells that you get from some of these orders are actually really strong and quite compelling. And I'm gonna have to remember, people will have to look this up. Like this level 1 focus spell that the Druid gets, Tempest Surge, if you're a Storm Druid, is pretty nice. D12 damage, and if they fail their saving throw, they're clumsy 2 for 1 round. That's a -2 to AC. That's for a focus point. And then it scales. Oh, and you get persistent damage, and it scales D12 every 2 levels. This is a fantastic focus spell, and is quite powerful and quite good. But if we go with the Flame Druid, they get the Wildfire focus spell, and it makes a small section of the battlefield covered in ash. It's not difficult terrain, it's hazardous terrain. A creature that moves on the ground takes 1 point of fire damage. And every 2 focus levels, that means not like every 2 levels you gain, it's every 2 levels of spell. So at focus 3, aka when you're 5th level, it will do 2 points of damage. I'm not saying that this is completely useless, but it is on a completely different power level than Tempest Surge. And so again, some of these spells are quite good. Some of these order spells are quite good, because the fact of the matter is, the order is going to give you a focus spell, and it's also going to give you a feat. And the feats that you get from your order are limited and restricted to that order. So for example, if you aren't if you aren't an animal order druid, okay, then you don't get the animal companion feat. You have to be an animal order druid in order to get the animal companion feat. So again, in 3rd edition, your character could be this cool, blaster druid and have an animal companion and be really cool at polymorphing and wild shaping and turning into a bunch of different animals. Druids just got all those abilities. But now, if you want to have an animal companion, just like a Beastmaster, an animal companion is a very strong class feature. There's no doubt about that. But you're not going to be able to do that and also be wild. Now, there is a feat that lets you dip into multiple orders, but the fact of the matter is it is a lot harder in order to pick up all of the sort of abilities that, druids used to get. So what about these druidic feats? Now, I'm not going to lie. They're not that great. Like the cleric, like some of the other primary spellcasters, except for sorcerer, a lot of the feats, in my personal opinion, in the druid are not all that compelling. If you're the storm druid, you start off with Stormborn. You do not take circumstance penalty to range spell attacks or perception checks caused by weather, and targeted spells don't require a flat check to succeed against a target concealed by weather, such as fog. That's not good. It's very thematic. It's very flavorful. I like that, but that is not really adding any mechanical oomph to your character. And I'm not saying that it needs to. In fact, one of the things I argue about all the time as a strength of Pathfinder 2nd edition is I say that I feel like in most cases, feats are pretty optional. Your core class abilities that you get, the stuff that you get automatically as you level up, is what really defines your character. And if your character didn't have any feats, you would still essentially be able to operate. And as a spellcaster, if you just had your core features and your spellcasting, if you just forgot to take feats for 10 levels, for 20 levels, and you didn't have any feats, yes, you would be weaker than a character that took feats. But you would still fundamentally kind of work the same. And you would probably be actually able to beat most, if not all, moderate encounters, and probably a good deal of severe encounters if you have some idea of how you're playing. That being said, one of the things that this, what Pathfinder 2 does with these orders is sort of takes away the idea of druids are all being the same, right? And that is something I think that it's kind of like half a dozen of one, six of another. Pathfinder 2 increases build diversity because now if you're a druid, before, if you were a druid in 3rd edition, you got all the same abilities. If you were a druid in Pathfinder 1, you got all the same druid abilities that every other druid got. You got them at the same levels. You had the same abilities. Yeah, they might have a bear and you have a wolf, but for the most part, you had the same spell list. You had the same class features. You had the same class abilities, right? It was all completely the same. They were very powerful. They were very good, but you were all the same. Now, Pathfinder 2 gets a lot of praise because your characters could be very different. But the downside of that is the reason why you could be so different is because they took away all of those abilities that you used to all just get automatically, and now they make you pick only a couple of them. So yes, your characters do feel different from other druids that are in Pathfinder 2nd edition, but it's only because they stripped away all of these abilities that have been hallmarks of the druids since 1976. And now you have to access them through, feats that you would otherwise not gain access to them to. Cybersmith with a super chat. Thank you, Cybersmith, for single-handedly supporting this stream. The different orders are narratively cool. It is a Pokemon-like idea. To be the best druid, you must travel Galarian and learn from many circles. Yeah, except it doesn't quite work that way, right? Because you can't actually learn from another circle. The only way you can gain that ability is by leveling up and taking the feat, correct? I might be wrong here, but, there is, yes, narratively it is interesting. Because again, I like the idea of the stone druid, of the wave druid, of the storm druid, right? It sounds really cool. It sounds really awesome. But I think this one's also really good, by the way. The stone one, crushing ground. Is this the one that prones you? No, but if it fails, they're flat-footed and they get a -10 penalty to speed. It's 2d6, which scales at 2d6 each level, so it's burning hands damage. It's not, look. Also, it's 60 feet, which is also really, really cool. And if they do critically fail, they are flat-footed, double damage, immobilized, and they have to escape. And if they don't escape, they take an additional 2d6 damage. The stone one is another really good one. But yeah, I think that the druidic feats are a little lacking. And honestly, if you get here's part of the problem. Like if you get to level 4, okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 feats. Wow, that's a lot of feats to pick from. Yeah, except over half of them require that you be from an existing order, which means that if you're not an animal companion, if you don't have an animal companion because you're not an animal order druid, you can't take mature animal companion. If you didn't take leaf order, you can't take leshy familiar. If you didn't go wave order, you can't take natural swimmer. So if you are a wave order druid, when you get to level 4, the only thing that you can pick from is cryptic spell, which just came out in Dark Archive, elemental summons, and natural swimmer. So those are the only feats that you can pick from. So even though there's 12 feats listed, if you're a wave order druid, you only get to pick from 4 of those. So again, it's an interesting progression in the way that operates. And this is a problem I think the champion has as well, which is, when you have a class like the druid that has all of these different subclasses, what ends up happening is the feats end up getting really, really segregated because of the requirements. This sounds really cool. Sorry, you're not the right druid order. You didn't take that druid order. And so you're like, okay, well, And it's just very frustrating. You're like, oh, cool, I want to take this ability. Well, no, you needed to be wild shape from the beginning of the game, and you had to have taken all the other, it's like you had to take all the other wild shape feats just to even be proficient at wild shape. So there's no point wild shaping unless you're going to be really good at it, because otherwise it kind of sucks, because we can't just let you take one wild shape feat and be as good as the druid who has taken 2 or 3 or 4 wild shape feats. And so it just becomes this kind of problem where sometimes I feel like you feel priced in to taking the same feats because that's your order feat, and all the other feats are either off limits to you or, quite frankly, very, very unappealing. And so that is a problem, I think, with the druid class for sure. Let's see here. The lance focus spell from the storm order is pretty cool. Let's take a look at that one. Stone Lance. All right, 120-foot range. That's sweet.
Kragan tipped $5.
Hey, Kragan.
I feel like they don't quite hit the mark with caster focus druid in Pathfinder 2. None of the orders seem particularly conducive for it.
Kragan, I actually agree with that big time. My cleric, which got to 20th level, was we had free archetype. Was free archetype a druid, so not quite a full druid, but the problem with the caster focused druid is we're looking at Stone Lance here, but I want to talk about what Kragan just talked about. Is let me open this up in a different window. The problem with the what Kragan is talking about is, if we look at all of these feats, most of these are not about our spell casting. Right? They are about our order, or they are about wild shape, or they're about animal companions. And that's okay to a certain extent, but like the druid clearly is designed now to be a spellcaster. And the only thing that we really get is the ability to get more focus spells and more focus points through our elemental dedication. And it's really hard to do much else with your actual spellcasting slots. So it is kind of frustrating in that regard. Because again, the druid was historically druid was kind of everything. The druid was kind of a badass spellcaster, and then they could turn to, did you watch the D&D movie? Was that sweet? Yeah, it was sweet. That druid is like what everybody wants their druid to be like. And in the game of Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder 2nd edition, your druid will never be like that. Outside of turning into an owlbear or whatever, which is technically illegal in 5th edition, but like that character who could, cast spells and then also transform at a moment's notice and rapidly switch between different forms and be small and be huge and be big, and then in combat be an absolute monster, I think is really, really, really cool. The Honor Amongst Thieves druid didn't cast any spells. All right, fair enough. Hell, fine. Let me be a druid who can cash in my spellcasting abilities to make me into this really cool, awesome, wild shaping badass. And it's like, they won't let us do that. And because no matter what you do as a druid, and by the way, I'm not complaining about this, because the druid's spells are very powerful. Primal is very powerful. But because no matter what you do with your druid, you are going to get all of these spells, right? Then all the other stuff has to be very, very, very secondary, because the druid is, I don't know exactly what their budget is, but like 85% or whatever of the druid power budget is in this list of spells. That is what your druid. So everything else that you want to add to your druid, the animal companion, the wild shape, the elemental stuff, is all really, 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 really secondary, right? Like you just do not have the power budget in the balance in order to make those abilities really, really work, you know? So and again, it's not even a problem. It's why for the first time ever, like, again, I lived the opposite of this. right? I lived through codzillas. Okay, I had quite a few codzillas in my 3E era where these characters were unbelievable because they could wild shape and be stronger than the barbarian, and they could cast spells and be more damaging than the fighter, and they could also teleport, and they could also raise the dead, and they could also cure diseases, and they could also cast, cure wounds and heal spells and restore everybody to full. And like, they could do everything everybody could do. I can do anything, you can do better, right? I can do anything better than you. It's like, that was what they were. And so was it sweet if you were a cleric or a druid? Yeah. But, was it balanced or fun or fair? Probably not. Ayla, $5 super chat. This stream was voted on by the Jagged Pine or the Jagged Pine Pact faction because free archetype druid. So I'll be the one to ask, what do you think about the free archetype synergy of druid? All right. Well, that's a great super chat. So let's talk about it. For starters, the druid free archetype is a basic caster archetype. So that means you are going to pick up 2 cantrips at level 2. You're going to pick up basic spell casting, aka a first level, second level, third slot with your 4th level feat. You can get primal breath to get more lower level slots, expert to get higher level, and then master, which will eventually take you all the way to 8th level magic at the very end of the game. Now, that being said, I think the primal list is incredibly fun. And as a free archetype, despite the fact that you're just dedication, cleric and druids get the advantage that they still get the whole list, right? If you're a wizard dedication free archetype, you still need to maintain a spell book. Same with a witch, spell familiar. If you're a sorcerer, you're still stuck on that repertoire, which is worse because you have so few spell slots, right? But with druid, it's prepared and you can pick from the whole list. So yes, you get less spell slots than the other, but the cleric and the druid can pick from the whole list, except the druid's primal spell list is way better than the cleric's divine spell list. So in many ways, in terms of gaining spell progression, like this, I think is the best. Arcane is obviously better, but there's no one who can get arcane that doesn't get it either in the form of a repertoire, which really, really limits you, or in a spell book, which has its own pain in the ass, problems. So I think in that respect, the druidic spell casting dedication is probably one of the strongest in the game as a dedication, because you get access as these, you get 1-ofs and 2-ofs through your spell progression and your breath, your primal breath. You get 1-ofs and 2-ofs of some of the best spells in the game. Fear, slow, haste, heal, chain lightning, fireball. You could just sprinkle these into your character and no matter what else you're doing, be really, really freaking effective as a result of it. And then there's even just great all-purpose utility spells like Long Strider, Fairy Fire, and now you can get access to those either via scrolls or because, you have higher levels, you have so many slots. I always keep a Fairy Fire prepped at level 2 because why not, right? And Dreadon says, I am going cleric druid archetype. That is what I did as well, Dreadon. When I played our Dark of Winter campaign, I was a Moss, my halfling cleric of Saren Ray, cloister cleric of Saren Ray, 1 to 20, free archetype druid. And that is what I went. And yes, exactly, Cyber. There's so much power in spell casting, you really can't add too much. So yeah, I think the free archetype is good. You could pick up eventually. I don't, I like the order spells, depending on what order you go with. I would never try to free archetype into like the wild shape. I just don't think wild shaping works in Pathfinder 2. I'll say that. Like, the requirements of balance make it that you can't function. Like if they were going to do wild shape justice, then they should have done it like they did with the War Priest, but actually do it better and have it be like you get like slower, or I don't even know how they would do it. You get less spells or slower progression, or like the psychic spell progression, or something like maybe not float like a summoner, but you would just, get master at 13 or 15 and, actually be able to be, combative. But the problem is in Pathfinder 2nd edition, like when you're a fighter or barbarian or whatever, like all you can do fundamentally at the end of the day is attack. And so if a spellcaster can come in and be better at you, or even close, forget being better, forget being the same, if they're even close to as good as you, and they can cast all of their spells, like the game basically saying, look, that was Pathfinder 1. We do not want to do that. And so they have really, really reined in the animal companions and the wild shaping. And as a result, I don't think it's, great. Now, like, I think Shadram's not off base here. Like if your character was, like a magus, or a fighter, and you wanted to pick up some of the wild shape abilities, it would not be optimal, but at least it would be functional because you have that base level of weapon proficiency, which would allow you to actually be able to, function as that sort of wild shaping druid. But that being said, I think clerics and druids are spoiled when it comes to these spellcasting dedications because of the way that they get access to the entire tradition when they prepare. And because primal is better than divine, that makes the druid, I think, the basic druid spellcasting, the best basic spellcasting dedication, archetype feat in the game. And you also can eventually pick up some druid feats. So then the question is, how good are some of the low-level druid feats? And the answer is not particularly good. But there are a couple that are worth picking up. Let me find it. For example, it's usually not one that you pick up. So like I know that I picked up at higher level when I had extra feat. I picked up poison resistance because it doesn't have any requirements. It's fairly low level. And after you've picked up your feats that are giving you your right spells, you pick this up and boom, you get poison resistance equal to half your level. And so it's like, 10 poison resistance at level 20, 5 at level 10. You're probably not going to have a ring on it. You're probably not going to have a rune of it on your armor, right? You're going to save that for fire, electricity, cold, right? And so, picking up poison resistance 10 for a feat that is off of an archetype, especially a free archetype, that's really good. I actually think poison resistance is one of the better feats in it. Again, some of these focus spells are really, really strong. So like, for example, people were talking about if you went with the stone, you get that at level 6. Level 6, you get advanced elemental spell. Now, obviously you would not be able to get this with dedication until level 12. And this is where dedications, I think they need to fix this. I think dedication shouldn't be half level. I think it should be like level -4, maybe. Like, being 18th level and picking up not a level 9 feat, because those don't exist. Being 18th level and picking up a level 8 feat feels so bad. It feels so bad. I really don't think it should just be half. I think it should be like -2 or -4 or something like that. But anyways, some of these focus spells are quite powerful. And so, picking up Stone Lance at level 12 could be a really little powerful boost for you because it's a good range spell, 120 feet. And you launch a foe, you have to make a spell attack against the target, which normally sucks. But if you're like a fighter, then that's pretty sweet because you have a really good attack bonus. Oh no, it's a spell attack roll. So never mind. You'll suck at this. I thought it was just, I was confused by spell attacks for a moment. Never mind. I don't love this anymore, but some of the other ones are really good. So yeah, I like the primal list. I think going free archetype druid and getting access to, 1 or 2 primal spells per level for most of the game, I think that's really compelling. I think that's really powerful. All right, let me see what everybody here is saying. Cyberchats. I need to head off now. Thank you, Cybersmith, again, for the very generous pounds. Appreciate that. Thank you so much. Appreciate all the support that everyone gives us, our patrons and our YouTube supporters, and of course, anybody who is tipping and supporting us. Appreciate that. We are $4 away from our poll to pick our next Pathfinder 2 stream. So if we can get a five or six more dollars of super chats, we'll put that poll up. We'll let you all decide what we talk about next when we talk about Pathfinder 2 again on the channel. And of course, our Origins 2023 drinking fund, that is a more long-term goal, but we are already halfway over there. As you know, we're going to be at Origins 2023 here in a few weeks in Columbus, Ohio. Me, Bob, Aaron. We're also going to have a bunch of patrons who are going to be coming in from around the area, or in some cases, hopping a flight to get to Columbus. Can't wait to meet up with them. And I look forward to seeing you. We're hopefully going to have some new Knights of the Last Call merch. So you should be able to recognize us by our logo, or maybe just my jolly personality and friendly smile. I definitely encourage you to stop by, say hi. Happy to shoot the shit with you and talk about the game. So, look forward to seeing more of you there. And while we're there, we're Knights of Last Call. We have a beer mug in our logo. There is going to be some drinking with our friends, and the Origins 2023 drinking fund helps support that. So appreciate that so much. But Cybersmith want to know, what about the movement speeds of Wild Shape? Swim, fly, climb, etc. There is some utility power there. And I don't disagree with you, Cybersmith. I do think that there is something to be said there. However, here's the problem. There are so many limitations to spellcasting when you are wild shaped. See, there used to be a feat. It was a broken feat. I'm not going to lie. It was a very broken feat. But in 3rd edition, there was a broken feat called Natural Spell. And Natural Spell was a feat that every single druid took, and it allowed you to keep casting spells even when you were wild shaped, which was obviously very, very powerful and broken. But the point, though, is that in Druids, you are a spellcaster. And when you are not spellcasting, you are paying a big price. And changing shape and losing your ability to cast spells is a big, huge ask to do. And, a sorcerer who is a sorcerer who's not capable of casting spells, or a wizard not capable of casting spells, is laughable. And, there's a reason why most of those polymorphs, the battle forms that we covered in All Spells Ranked, aren't really that great. Because even though it gives you a competitive attack roll and damage, you lose all your spellcasting capabilities. And it's not like it makes you a better fighter than the fighter, or a better, warrior than the barbarian. It makes you a little bit of a subpar warrior than the barbarian. And in exchange, you are giving up all of your spellcasting capabilities when you're in one of those battle forms, polymorph forms. And the same thing is true for wild shape. So it is something to be concerned about. We got a sticker from Isaac. Is that a dancing leshy pair? I'm assuming that's what it is trying to be. And was obviously trying to hit us on the dot, but the Canadian conversion got him. But I will count that as being that we have our super chat reached. So let me know in the chat, for all of those of you who are still here, put some suggestions. I'm going to add them to the poll. What we should do for our next stream. There are about 90 people here, give or take. It could be a class. It could be a topic. It could be, anything. And I will add it to the poll until I run out of options. I think there's only 4 or 5 options. So let me know in chat, and we'll get those added to the options. All right. Rain Hunter is saying Thaumaturge. I like that one. Okay. Trevco saying Ranger. A Cleric. Okay. Now I'm not going to just pick the first 4. I'm going to say, if we get a couple of people, get really excited. Rule of Cool asks, when combat and tactics? Great question, Rule of Cool. Unfortunately, it is finished. I just have not had the time to dig into my old videos. It's been so long since I posted a video. I have to look up stuff and add it to our old video or our new video. But I got super busy last week. It was just unbelievable. And so I am going to be working on it this week because I have a much lighter week. Work is not nearly as crazy this week. I kind of have 2 bosses. And one of them is going to a bachelor party Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And the other one is flying around the country, attending a bunch of meetings. And so he's basically out of pocket for the whole week, which means I have it's very unlikely that I'm going to get any new work. And since I can usually attack my work pretty quickly and get it done sooner than later, I'll have some extra time to work on this job, aka finishing up combat and tactics. All right, so we got Thaumaturge, we got Wizard, Cleric. I did not do Sorcerer already. Another person says Thaumaturge. Okay, Thaumaturge is definitely on the list. Awesome just says Dwarf. Ooh, Psychic and Psionics. Okay. The history of Psychics, the history of Psionics in the game. I'm in for it. I think that'd be cool. Ayla, I agree with you. Ugh, fighter, just to get it out of the way. I'm agree with that. And we can see a monk. Ooh, comparing old modules to current adventure paths. Trevko, that's a really cool topic. Fighters fighting the world around. 7th Sea system overview. Well, Ford, while I do want to do a 7th Sea system overview, I do think that's a really, really cool system. And I look forward to talking about it. The poll, the super chat was specifically to choose our next Pathfinder 2nd edition. Isaac also says a psychic psionic history lesson would be the elf class would be fun as well. Let's see here. All right. I am going to go with Thaumaturge, psychic, fighter, and let's go. I'm looking for one more. All right. We'll keep it to those three. Actually, you know what? I will add Wizard. All right. Poll is up. Make your vote known. There's about 80 or 90 of you, so hopefully we can get some good votes here. Let me know which class you would like to see discussed next when we just talk about Pathfinder 2nd Edition, which will probably be next week. Again, Thursday is supposed to be our 100th live stream. So we might do something special. We might get into the studio and just do a fun kind of maybe look back on the channel and where we've come from and where we've been, and just have a cool opportunity to hang out with some of you and talk about some of other ideas, or you can just bounce questions. I'd also be happy to answer any questions that people have, like about the mechanics of the channel, YouTube, the business of, role-playing games and all that other stuff. We don't always have to just cover exactly only that stuff. So I think that'll be pretty fun. And then next week we'll take care of this. We'll take care of this topic. So, let's see. Tim says maybe a D&D Warlock / Pathfinder Witch discussion somewhere in there. I think that is really interesting. Namely in how cool and successful the D&D Warlock is, and how I think pathetically sad the Pathfinder Witch is. If the Pathfinder Witch was more like the D&D 5e Warlock, I think that would be a really good thing for sure. We have not done an inventor deep dive, and can we come up with a possible fixes for this garbage class? Look, it's flavorful, but it has got a lot of problems. RPG Bouncer, you're not wrong. Old witch to new witch. I mean, Icarus, once we start getting more information about Remastered, I definitely want to dig into that deep. A couple of things I want to talk about once we get more detail about them are Pathfinder Remastered information as it comes available to us, including up to and including the release. I really want to talk about the Darrington Press Critical Role games. I still have I still meant to do a stream to talk about the Candela Obscura and the Illuminated Worlds engine. And I know it's just the quick start rules, but kind of give my thoughts on that. Obviously, it's Blades in the Dark inspired, but I also want to talk about Daggerheart once we start getting information about Daggerheart as well. Carzones just says Bard again. Wizard before schools are illegal. You're going to be at Kings Island on Thursday. Is the Beast still at Kings Island? The Son of the Beast? Serious Whimsy says, when will you do more live play? Well, Serious Whimsy, if you had watched our Patreon live stream, exclusive Patreon live stream yesterday, you would have known that we kind of laid out the schedule for the upcoming shows. And we're going to be starting Root. The Root actual play is starting July 18th. We are probably going to do some pre-shows leading up to the start of that. We'll probably do like a show where we talk about Root, the rules, some of the information about the game for people who don't know anything about it, so that you're a little bit more informed about the mechanics and some of the idea or the things behind it. And then we'll also cover session 0, and we're going to show my cast making their characters, talking about the campaign, maybe getting some cool feedback from you all in chat. And then we're going to proceed. And the first session is going to be July 18th. All right. I'm going to end the poll. And I'm going to end the poll in 1 minute. So you have 1 minute left. How do you vote? I think you just click on the button, Trevco. I just think you click on the class that you want. Sometimes people have a problem. If you're on mobile or something, Trevco, sometimes people have a problem with it. See, Ayla says, agreed. Pathfinder 2 Witch makes me so damn sad. I love the Witch thematically. Implementation in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is awful, though. Looking forward to the remaster version. I hope they go hard in the paint. I know they're like, we really want to up the familiar. No, I want the Witch to be the king or queen of like hexes and debuffing and, taking apart their enemies with persistent damage and debuffs. I want them to be, I would be fine. Like if the witch couldn't even buff their allies or heal their allies. Maybe they can only heal their allies if they're stealing life energy from their enemies. I think being hex focused is so cool. And I love the idea of like their spell slots sort of interplaying with their focus spells. You know how like the bard's composition focus spells interact with their composition cantrips, right? Like how you can like use a focus spell in order to enhance the composition cantrip. I would love to see witch spells slots do something similar for like witch focus spells. Number one, it would make them feel mechanically different than any other class / witch / wizard, which is what they are, just a bad approximation of. But also, I just really want to dig into, I just love the idea of a hex class. It doesn't have to be like a massive damage dealer like the 5e warlock is, which, 5e warlock, by the way, there was never a warlock class until 4th edition D&D. And in 4th edition D&D, well, I guess there was in 3rd edition D&D at the very end of it, but it was like a precursor to the 4th edition D&D. But the 4th edition and the very late 3rd edition warlock were just damage dealers, which is kind of what the 5th edition one is. And so I don't want it to be a damage dealer. That's not what spellcasters are really good at or designed to do in this edition. I'm okay with that. That's a decision they made, and I think it's interesting. But yeah, I believe that they should be like the kings or queens of debuffing. All right, we're going to end the poll. And with a clear victory, it is fighter at 37%. So it looks like some of you are just want to get it over with. And we'll talk about the fighter, and we'll get that covered. So, look, we'll eventually get to all of them. I mean, hell, we can do the fighter right now. Broken. So there we go. Tim says, I'm just glad to have an int-based primal caster. I already have a couple druids, and primal sorcerers don't have enough skills. Yeah. I don't know how I feel about the witches being primal or arcane. I don't know. It's weird to me that like how important is if you could just pick from any tradition, I don't know. I just feel like it diminishes the importance of the tradition. I don't know. I'm very torn about that. Even with sorcerers. Yeah, I don't know. It's really interesting. I think what attracts people to Warlock Rule of Cool is just the idea, because regardless of its power, I think they just like that they get all their stuff back easily. I think people hate the idea. People hate fancy and casting, and they just like the idea of being able to get all their cool stuff back. I think that's really I personally think that is what it comes down to. Damien, that is what I would prefer. That is what I have argued should be the case. And that would be cool by me. So I like to be able to heal and do other stuff too. Yeah, no, Tim, I agree. But to be fair, the occult has soothe. You can soothe as an occult, but all Yeah, I'm just saying you can heal with a cult. But like I said, I for me it's like I think it'd be more fun if like the witch could do things where it's like, you know, they can only heal like and Pathfinder 2 already does this. Okay, like look up here. What am I saying? Look up. I've got the fucking Archives of Death is right here. There is this cleric focus spell, which I had, which is really cool. It's part of healing. What is it called? It's called like Fountain or something. God, there's so many there's so many of these things. What is the name of that? Somebody in chat help me. It's the healing reservoir one. Someone's going to say it. Illumination. Come on. All these people, masters of, is it Vital Beacon? Is it not here? Where is it? The heck? Shouldn't it be there? Oh, it's not a focus spell? No. This is not what I'm talking about. What is the name of that freaking spell, people? Asmon. Well, Matt, all just a bit off topic. Before becoming a Patreon member, I have a question with regards to Northern Reaches. 30 GM campaigns as an Australian. Are there any groups running an Australian time zone? Well, Asmon, we do have GMs from all over the world, including Europe, which I know can frequently run Australian games. But also, last year, we actually had a lot of people who ran games in the morning, U.S. time, so they could run, basically was running games evening in Australian time, because we would offer our GMs additional incentives in order to, because we kind of, we give our GMs prizes and giveaways for running games. But if you were running for a slot or a time zone that is kind of desperately needs GMs, people would get bonus incentives, and that turns out it worked. And people would go out of their way to run games for our European and Australian, Oceania people. So obviously, you will not get, it will not be as convenient as being on American time zone, but my experience has been that the GMs are usually pretty 24 hours around the clock. All right. So, Positive Luminance. Thank you, Ryan. That is the name of the spell. Okay. Here we go. Positive Luminance. This is from the Sun domain. That's it. Okay, not the healing domain. All right, I got off topic here because this is just what popped into my head. For those of you who aren't aware of this focus spell, it's really, really cool. Number one, it takes one action to cast. And when you cast it, every round you build up a reservoir of energy, which starts at 4, and then it goes to 8, and then it goes to 12, and then it goes to 16, and then it goes to 20. As you get higher level and the focus spell automatically heightens, then the initial value and the amount it goes up by each turn increase by 1. So eventually it starts at 5, and then it goes 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And it does this automatically. Each turn, it just increases. At the start of each turn, you can use a free action to increase the value in the reservoir. So you get this like literal pool of positive energy that's building up. It also creates an aura or radius of light. If an undead attacks you, you take some damage equal to half of your reservoir value. So as you get to charged more up with light, undead take more and more damage. And then you can dismiss the spell, which is an action. And when you do, you can then target an enemy and an undead enemy and blast them with positive energy, or you can target an ally and heal them. And this heals a living target or damages an undead target by the amount equal to your reservoir value. This spell is so cool and fun and interesting, and there's like so many cool ways. And like this to me is like the promise of what we could be doing with this game, with Pathfinder 2. And I would love to see more stuff like this. So imagine like a hex that a witch can cast on an enemy, and then it creates this reservoir. I'm just using this spell as an example. Then every time that enemy takes damage, the reservoir goes up. So as your allies attack that enemy, they're building up this reservoir. And then when the enemy dies, you get to use that reservoir of energy to maybe heal an ally, because it's like you stole their life essence or their pain and converted it into healing and then put it into one of your allies. And that's just using this one spell as an example. And the cool thing about this is it doesn't take up, 2 actions to cast it. It's 1 action to cast it. And then each turn you're making a decision. Like, do I sit on this and let it build up, or do I cash it in early? Right. There's a lot of stuff going on in this relatively small spell. And this is a focus spell. You could do this every fight. In fact, my cleric, who had the sun domain and the healing domain, would usually in the first turn of a combat, 2 action cast a spell, 1 action cast positive illuminance, like every fight. Because at the very least, I had this charging up positive illuminance. And if the fight went long, I basically had this like free action, more or less, spell that could heal for a pretty decent chunk of life by the time you got to the 3rd, 4th, or 5th round of a fight. Anyways, I would love to see the witches spells, like, and just more spells in general, especially focus spells, because you get to use them all the time, do really cool and interesting and fun stuff like this spell. Anyways, Asmon, to have a chance to play in the events, is it Knight or Champion Patreon level? Asmon, it is Champion Patreon level. Our Patreon doesn't say it currently yet because our GMs are currently at work building adventures and are, about to start launching people into heroic forays and gaining levels. I don't want to advertise to people that, hey, join and you can start playing today. You can't start playing today. When you join, it's just one guy, Bob, who works for us, who has to, they have to get you set up on our server. They have to get you set up on our hero vault, which manages the characters. It's not just like, joining a quick pickup game off of Discord. It's a little bit more structured and organized. So once everybody is onboarded and games are officially happening, then I will put it into the Patreon. But it is champion tier in order to play in Northern Reaches. And it's not a chance to play. You will get to play. It's just a question of that. And of course, Asmon, if you do join and you're having a really hard time getting a game, that's what our overlords are for. I'm an overlord. Bob's an overlord. I think our patron Boothby is going to be joining us in Overlord. Just send us a message and say, hey, I'm really excited about the game, and I've noticed that it's been hard for me to get into sessions and links. And then, we try to accommodate people as much as we can. It's one of the advantages of only being 300 strong is we can usually kind of bend over backwards to help some of our people out. Exactly, Gabriel. In fact, as an aside, I think more, if not all, focus spells should be 1 action. Now, maybe you make it like flourish or something. I don't know. So you can't just go like focus, focus, focus. But at the same time, maybe that'd be fine too. I don't care. Like, I just think it's cooler if you had the ability to then, because now it's like, oh man, do I cast my main spell? It's like, as a spellcaster, it's like, I feel like you're automatically priced into that 2 actions. But if focus spells were always 1 action, or more of them were 1 action, and if they were compelling, really truly compelling at 1 action, then as a spellcaster, you could feel more like, hey, I'm going to do something else and move, and I'm still going to be able to do something relevant or important this turn. And I feel like the problem with a spellcaster is if you do anything that involves taking 2 actions, it's like you feel like your turn was wasted because you're not going to be able to cast a spell. And I even a cantrip takes 2. So I just think that is really, tough. I know they're buffing focus pools. Focus pools are going to come back now to 3. Well, if your focus pool is 3, then you don't need to wait till, you don't have to take those 2 stupid feat taxes to get all that focus back. So that is really cool, Brutus. I am a big fan. I'm a huge fan of that. That was a house rule in my game since the game started, and I'm happy to see that they are making that the actual rule in the game. I got rid of those feat taxes immediately. No problem, Asmon. I'm happy to help, and if look forward to seeing you in the Patreon when you get in there. That'll be really sweet. And the other thing too is, you know me, I'm a tactical guy. I I understand that Pathfinder 2 casters are more beefy than they've ever been, right? Everybody gets a way to get armor class. There's no 4 hit point classes anymore. Everybody gets at least 6. But, there's still lower hit points and possibly lower armor class than other classes. And so I like the idea that it's like, hey, if we could protect our caster, they don't have to move. They don't have to try to escape or grapple. They don't have to try to stand up. They've got all 3 actions. And if they want to, they can focus, slot, and do a double whammy. But if the caster's got to, I got to move, I got to fall back, I got to repossession, then it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Like, I don't get to do 2 cool things this turn because I didn't have that tactical edge that I would have had otherwise. It's another reason why I don't like meta magic. Meta magic to me should be increasing my versatility, but it's like, it takes an extra spell as action, which means it takes 3 actions, which means that's my whole turn. And I feel personally, me, Derek, who's played several spellcasters, Pathfinder 2nd edition, I feel like meta magic spells actually make me feel worse than if I didn't cast the meta magic spell. Is that weird? Is that crazy? Am I completely weird here? But I really do feel that way. I feel like I would almost never use meta magic, even if with like reach spell, 9 times out of 10, I'd rather move forward the 30 feet and then cast the 30-foot spell than use 3 actions to cast the 30-foot spell as a 60-foot spell all the way, from 60 feet away. I'm not a big fan. I'm really not a big fan. Actually, what would be cool is if meta magic spells were focus spells, but like, I don't know, free action focus spells, right? They didn't take an action, but it did take a focus point, which meant you could only do it so many times during the course of a fight. And it was technically using out of that other resource pool, which, you might be using for your other focus spells. Like that would be cool. That would be a cool way to do it. Yeah, you'd love to join Patreon, but I can only do cryptocurrency. Hey, listen, I don't know what kind of currency Patreon accepts. They might accept cryptocurrency. We got a lot of people because every month I get the transaction fee that I pay for currency conversions because we've got people paying euros and Australian dollars and we've got all sorts of different currencies in there. So, but anyways, yeah. I like the old meta magic. It asks you for a higher level spell slot and not your entire turn. Yeah, it was okay. What I really liked was, I think it was like late 3rd edition. They came out with I think they were called the sudden meta magic feats. And it was basically like once or twice a day, you could just do it. And it didn't take a higher spell slot and it didn't take an extra action, but you could only do it once or twice a day. And I don't know. Yeah, that probably was too powerful, but it felt fun and it felt cool. And that's the problem with meta magic now, right? You can do it every time you cast the spell, which means they have to either make it very weak or very action inefficient. And in this case, they do both. So it kind of sucks. But yeah, so Druid, fighter next time. Druid is a totally fine class. I think we gave it like a C at low levels, and I think we gave it a B at mid and high levels. I think it is a totally reasonable spellcasting. Primal is a great tradition. Obviously, it is not going to be as strong of a pure spellcaster as a sorcerer is, because that class is just really good at that. You don't get look, you're getting 3 spells. Sorcerer gets 4. The wizard gets 3 spells, but then they get 1 spell slot back from their focus per level, assuming they're universalist. So the wizard gets 4. The cleric gets the same number of spells as you, but they get 3 or 4 or 5 extra max level spells, heal only. Long story short, you're not really, compared to the other, sorcerer and the cleric and the wizard, you're not casting that many spells because you don't get any of those cool things. You don't get 4 spell slots per level like the wizard and sorcerer. You don't get the divine font like the cleric. You just get the primal list, which arguably isn't as good as the arcane spell list. So it's totally acceptable. It's totally fine. Primal's really great, but it is not, A tier material, right? But it's totally acceptable and it works completely fine. I think there are some builds and ideas that don't really work that well, even if they are fun and cool and flavorful. I don't think animal companions are particularly strong in Pathfinder 2nd edition, but the Beastmaster rules are pretty cool too. And so that's pretty cool. The animal build is pretty cool. But again, the free archetype Beastmaster pretty much does the same thing. So you don't really need to be a druid to get that. I don't think wild shaping is really worth it as a pure druid. Maybe there's some world where you can combine it with some other crazy dedication and being a primary barbarian or fighter or something, and you get something out of it. But for the most part, I don't think anything with the polymorph trait is worth it for the druid, because then you can't cast spells and your character is balanced on being a spellcaster. And then the feats, like I said, some of them are pretty cool and I don't mind them. And I think they're pretty interesting and useful, but for the most part, I think that you feel pretty priced into what feat you're going to take, because you're like, oh, cool, I'm level 4. And it's like, well, if I'm a flame order druid, I get to take fire resistance, but I can't take Leshy familiar secrets. I can't take form control. I can't take mature animal companion. I can't take natural swimmer. I can't take sheltering cove. I can't take thousand faces. I can't take woodland stride. Right. So it's like so many of the feats you don't even get access to. So you do feel pretty priced in. Now, of course, as I said at the beginning of the stream, there is a level 2 feat, Order Explorer, which you can take multiple times, and it gives you access to a new druidic order. And in fact, you get the first level feat of that order. So it's like a feat for a feat. It's a level 1 feat, but as you get higher levels. So you can pick up additional orders, but to be completely clear, number one, you're kind of paying a little bit of a tax for it, right? Because, you're taking this feat, which gives you the feat that you would get back, but that's a level 1 feat. That's not bad at level 2. But if you're like level 10 and you're taking Order Explorer, you're trading a level 10 feat to take Order Explorer, which is going to get you a level 1 feat. That's where the price starts to get pretty, kind of expensive. And even if you do that, you're not going to gain. It's not like you can take all of these feats anyways. So I think most druids are probably going to end up taking Order Explorer at least once and maybe have 2 orders. But, you don't want to spread yourself too thin. So, tons of people use meta magic rods. Yes. In 3rd edition, we used a lot of meta magic rods as well, Isaiah. Yes, very much so. And in Pathfinder 1, it's definitely Pathfinder 1. We used a lot of meta magic rods. They were sweet in Pathfinder 1. Sorcerer is like the fighter. The fighter is the poster child of the martial class that other martials are measured against. The sorcerer is what casters are measured against. That is accurate and true. Sorcerer is very strong. Yes, even the bard gets composition cantrips. So again, it's like they feel like they get now, yes, you could say, oh, but the druid gets the order spells. They start with a focus pool and they start with a focus spell. Yeah, but so does the cleric, cloister cleric. So does the sorcerer, right? So does the oracle, so does the witch, right? Like a lot of classes do. Like, so it's not really that. So does the wizard. Like everybody gets that. Is there a caster class that doesn't start with a focus spell? Yeah, war priest. Get fucked. Yeah, wild shape gives you +2 status bonus to your attacks. Totally reasonable. In my experience, though, it's like by the time it does that, I think you're probably close to getting heroism anyways, and then it's like in my party, somebody's always casting heroism, more or less. So if not from the slot, from a scroll. And so getting +2 status bonus is kind of usually neutral because heroism 6 would grant the same amount of bonus. Yeah. So that is the Druid. We came a long way from the 1970s, where the character was this, strange occultic, worshiper who had to fight other druids just to gain levels, to the heady days of 3rd edition and Pathfinder 1 when Codzilla ruled and crushed everyone before them with their with their unbelievably broken, powerful array of abilities like summoning or, summoning and polymorph and spellcasting in general, to Pathfinder 2, where the Druid is probably for the first time fairly balanced. And some of the cool things that make the Druid historically stand out as being this really cool caster, in order to maintain balance, they really had to reel in. And that is why polymorphing and wild shaping is lessened, and why animal companions aren't as strong. And so, but the primal spell list of the Druid in Pathfinder 2nd Edition is one of the strongest Druidic spell lists we've ever seen, because not only does it have all those classic Druidic abilities that we've had for 30, 40 years, but for the first time ever, we're getting spells like Fireball and Lightning Bolt and Ice Storm and Chain Lightning and, Horizon Thundersphere. Druids get that. Nice. You don't have to be a sorcerer. You can be a druid. You can cast that. So, definitely a cool and interesting class. Ayla, thoughts on fighter plus druid free archetype wild shape? All right. Let's take a look at this. So, you go free archetype druid. You pick up your anathema, which is already potentially problematic, but they got the bone armor now, and metal armor is going away anyways, right? You choose a druidic order. So we could pick wild. That gives us the wild shape druid feat. It also gives us wild morph order spell. So we get the wild shape, which gives us the wild shape order spell. So we get two spells. We got wild morph and wild shape. Wild shape, of course, lets us turn into anything in the pest form, and this is pretty much just, for fluffy bullshit time, which does last 10 minutes, so you can turn into a mouse, which is not bad for a fighter. And then all the other wild shape forms last 1 minute, and then eventually we can turn into animal form, which is... Let's see, the level we could have this. Is this any better than what we really have? So let's see here. So if we're fighter and we're level 2 and we're level 3 fighter, sorry. So this is now casting animal form. And we could turn into this. Our AC is 16 plus our level, which would be 19, when our armor normally would be like 21. So it's an armor, right? Because we'd have heavy armor at 6. Level 3 is, and trained, would be 21. So, you don't get wild shape until at least level 4. All right. Is that right? Did I read that wrong? It says you gain the wild shape druid feat and you gain the wild morph order spell. And the wild shape druid feat gives us the wild shape order form. So don't we get that right away? Cameron says free +2 status bonus on attack rolls. I've read that. I'm trying to remember where that's from, though. Let's see here. Now, it does say if your unarmed attack bonus is higher, you can use it. So, as a fighter, your unarmed attack bonus would be higher, right? Because at level 3, you would be, well, assuming you went expert in unarmed, which kind of sucks, but you'd be expert, unarmed, and then, assuming you went focus on unarmed at level 5, I should say. But level 3, you would be expert for level 3, 7, strength for 11, and a +1 bonus, 12. So yeah, you would definitely want to use your unarmed attack. Wild shape feat. Where does the wild shape feat give you +2 status bonus? Isn't this the wild shape feat? Oh, the archetype works differently. Oh, okay. I'm looking at the druid and not the... is there something different? No, I don't think so. Focus. Okay. Here we go. When you choose to use your own attack modifier while polymorphed instead of the form's default attack form, you get a +2 status bonus to your attack rolls. Okay. So there we have it. So your level 3, your level 2 fighter picks up Druid dedication and gets to pick a Druidic order. They pick animal, or they pick wild, which gives them the wild shape Druid feat and the wild morph order spell. The wild shape feat would give you this, and which is pest form. And then at level 3, this would heighten to 2, which means you can wild shape into the animal forms, and you could use your own attack modifier, which would be a +2 status bonus, which means you would have 4, 8, 11, 12, +2 from the status is a 14 bonus. So yeah, at level 3, that's insane. Now, the downside, of course, is you're going to be limited to unarmed attacks when you're not in this form. And the highest damage you could get is 2d8. Now, of course, striking runes usually don't become a thing until level 4. So you're actually ahead of the curve here. So this isn't too bad. Obviously, there's no way for you to do d10s or d12s. Also, your damage bonus is only +1. And while you can use your unarmed attack bonus if it's higher, I don't think you can use your damage bonus if it's higher. You didn't read all the paragraph. Dedication only gives you skill training. Oh, all right. Oh, okay. You don't gain any other abilities. Okay, so you have to take this then at 4. Okay, so you're level 4 when you take this. I mean, it's still not bad. I mean, your damage bonus being lower is a little unfortunate, right? Because like your fighter's damage bonus would be like 4. So you're doing less damage, but you will be slightly higher on your attack roll, but not as high if you have a bard or someone casting heroism or eventually greater heroism. It feels like this would kind of run off as you get, further on along the game. And I think your AC is always going to get shit on by this. Because like, okay, let's say you're a level 5 fighter. All right. Which means that you're heightening your animal form to 3. So level 5 in full plate, +1 full plate. +1 full plate is going to give you plus your dex or whatever. It's heavy armor. Dex is 0. Heavy armor 6. Magical 1 is 7 plus level 5. So 17 plus 5, 22 plus 2 from trained is 24. So you're level 5. So 17 plus your level is 22. So your AC is dropping by 2 by doing this. At least 2. So that kind of, it's like a weird rage. Also, it's 2 actions to turn into the animal. That's like a rage that costs 2 actions. That sucks. Yeah, I don't like it. I think that's too much of a price. Now, if you're playing like the bullshit way that some GMs and players did in Northern Reaches, where like they let them cast 48 spells outside the door while they're, investigating a mystery and pursuing a lead, and everybody's casting haste and everybody's casting all like and the monsters are doing nothing while the party and like the person's wild shaping before they go in. Okay, that's fine. But I mean, most of the time that is not going to be the case. And if a fight breaks out and my character is, just they're human and needs to take 2 actions on the first turn just to turn into this animal, you know, that doesn't seem like that's really, really worth it. You know, I don't hate getting 10-foot reach and large. And also, if I'm reading this right, like your damage dice never scale. Like they cap at 2d8. You get this damage bonus that keeps going up. Okay, it doubles the damage at 5. So at 9th level, you are doing 4d8, which is not bad, but you're not getting any of your strength bonus or your weapon specialization bonus. You're just getting this flat damage bonus. So you'd be doing like 4d8 plus 7, which is like 25 damage. And normally, if you were using, let's say, even a d8 weapon, I guess, you would be doing 3 of those plus your strength of 5 plus weapon specialization. I mean, you're only doing like 3 or 4 more points of damage. Yeah, I mean, you save money. I mean, I can't argue with that hassle. The problem, Frostjack, is yes, the fantasy is better fulfilled by this. That is true. But the problem is the fighter can hit really well. And because of this wild shape feat, if you're using your own attack modifier, which the fighter would because it's higher, they get a +2 status bonus to attack rolls, which, again, doesn't stack with heroism. But, you know, Heroism 6 isn't a spell that is even available to you until you're level 11. And even then, it's one of your highest level spells. So you're not going to have that many access to it. So I would say for the first half of the game, this highlighted ability is pretty strong for a fighter dedicating into the animal form. I still think using 2 actions to cast this is brutal, is what I would say. That is what I would say. But, you know, also you lose all the access to your spell items and abilities. But yeah, I mean, that could probably be pretty cool. I'm not saying it wouldn't be cool. All right. Little rabbit hole there about druids and archetyping and wild shaping. I once rolled a nat 1 and missed by +0 with this build. One time we were playing and someone rolled a nat 1 and they still hit. I'm trying to remember. I mean, it was like, obviously it was like the most insane thing ever. Like a fighter had given them legendary aid. They had a +3 bonus, status bonus from like a heroism. The creature was like flat-footed and had like a -3 or a -4 status penalty on their armor class or something crazy like that. So like their armor was down by like 18 or something or 19 points. It was pretty great. And they were like a little lower level. So like we were hitting them, you know, pretty easily anyways. And somebody rolled a nat 1 and we figured that out. Oh, that was at level 4? Okay, well, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, when you're fighting, when you're fighting at level 4, you know, with this build as a fighter, you're level 4, you have expert, that's 8, you have strength 12, you have a rune 13, and then the status bonus gives you a 15. If you're level 4 and you're fighting a level 4 monster, you know, if their AC is moderate to high, like you need a 5 to hit them with that build as a fighter. You know, that's pretty you know, that's pretty good. And obviously if, you know, you flat foot them or something like that, or do anything else to them, right, they're going to be down even further. So yeah, I mean, you know, that's, look, I mean, hitting enemies on 5s or 3s, which means you crit on 13s, is pretty good. You know, so there you go. No doubt about it. I mean, it's powerful. I mean, getting a bonus to attack is really good in this game. I mean, I think that you're paying a price of admission in the form of having to actually cast animal form. But outside of that, it's not bad. Pretty good. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for the Druid. If you have any thoughts or comments or questions, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear from you on our Patreon, patreon.com/nightsoflastcall. And you can join us at everything from our $3 tier, which will get you just into our private Discord. Only Patreon members are allowed access to our Discord. Kind of helps keep the community small and focused and engaged and not trolling. But for $10, you can join in at our champion tier, and that'll not only get you access to a bunch of our bonus content, bonus videos, PDFs, tickets, our award system, but it'll also give you access to our Northern Reaches game, which is just getting started like as we speak. So you'll be getting in at the ground floor. So definitely check that out. And if you want to go all the way up to hero tier, we do have some premium tiers. If you really want to support us, we love our heroes and our big supporters, and they really help make the channel what it is. So we've got all sorts of spectrums. Not everybody can drop $25 a month. We totally understand that, but for $3, you can come be a part of our community if you want to be passionate and learn not just about Pathfinder 2nd Edition, but about all the games that we play and we talk about. If you watch this channel, and you should be, that we talk about a lot of games on this channel, and we play a lot of games. So in the last month, my personal play group has played World of Dungeons, which is like a Powered by the Apocalypse clone, Pathfinder 2, Legend of the Five Rings, and Traveler. So I mean, that's a pretty wide range of games. So Corey C says wild shaping is pretty good at certain breakpoints, which is a lot of times with Pathfinder, there's these breakpoints, but falls off hard and for getting the extra economy. And Corey, I think that is a good way to sum it up, as for sure. I think Northern Reaches will be really cool this year, Ayla, and people are already getting pretty excited. And we have a bunch of optional rules. It's not like any campaign you've ever played before. I promise you that. It's very unique and very, very interesting. All right. I am going to get going. Again, we're going to figure out what we're going to do Thursday, but it should be our 100th live stream. So we'll probably do something fun. Maybe Bob and I will just hang out in the studio with you all and just shoot the shit and, just talk shop, as we love to do and are want to do. I will hopefully see you then, either on the next stream or on the Patreon Discord. Either way, thanks for checking us out, and we will see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Bye, everybody.